some 75 miles due south of Gauntlegrim. All she had wanted at that time, the summer of Dale Reckoning 1498, was to live simply, peacefully, keeping to herself. Her ambition was gone, her sense of purpose lost. She wanted nothing more than to wake up, do whatever chores would suffice to feed, shelter, and get her intoxicated for the day, then stumble to her hovel apartment and fall down unconscious. Existence. Just that. Until there was no more of that. That had all changed when she witnessed, quite by accident, a most shocking event. Every time Dahlia felt the fangs of Bedorije, she thought of that night. As usual. She had been the last patron to leave her favored drinking hole in Phandalin. More than a bit drunk, more than a bit depressed, she had dallied on her way back to her tiny room, wandering the streets in an aimless and circuitous route that had coincidentally put her on an avenue some 20 paces behind the tavern keeper, a too-pleasant halfling woman named Winnie Bean. Her call to Winnie had been cut short when she noticed a giant bat flying down from a rooftop, flipping and transforming as it neared the ground. The halfling tavern keeper's name caught in Dahlia's throat, even as the vampire's fangs sank into Winnie's neck. Spellbound, Dahlia had watched the creature's gentle caress of his chosen victim, had watched Winnie's obvious revulsion and rejection. How wildly the halfling woman had fought. But the diminutive Winnie had been completely overmatched, and the vampire soon had her caught fast once more. Winnie had met Dahlia's gaze in those last moments of her life, a helpless, terrified look on her face. A pathetic look, Dahlia had mused. And Dahlia didn't cry out for help and didn't rush to Winnie's aid, for it occurred to her that Winnie should have given in, and thus this fate was born of her own failing and panic. Dahlia watched the frenzy of blood overwhelm the vampire. What had been a gentle bite, a sharing of fluids, became an insatiable hunger. The Master of Night tore out Winnie's throat, gulping at her spraying blood, then dropped her corpse unceremoniously to the cobblestones. Dahlia met the gaze of the vampire when his feast was done, and she returned his toothy smile with a nod and a grin of her own. Strangely, she had felt no fear of him, and she knew that this vampire understood that truth. A 10-day later, after garnering as much information as she could, she had traveled to the dark and misty forest of Crypt Garden, to the ancient ruins of a long-abandoned monastery. Half buried under the roots and soil, she had found a tunnel, a cracked and broken stairway into the mostly intact substructure of that rubble. Upon her return to the small village, Dahlia again began to walk the streets of Phandalin in the dark, when all the folk were asleep. He had been waiting for her, she knew, when he came down at her from on high that very first night. But Dahlia was no halfling tavern keeper. She was a seasoned warrior, a great veteran, and she fended the vampire's attacks long enough to convince him that she wouldn't resist him if their tryst meant undeath instead of death. "I sought you out," she had told him in the midst of that initial meeting, a rolling battle along several alleyways and streets. "I know where rests your casket, and could have destroyed you in the daytime without my preference." That had given the vampire pause. "You know I speak the truth," Dahlia pressed. "You saw the rose I left at the top of the stair." She locked her blue-eyed stare on the vampire's dark orbs. "You play dangerous games," he warned. "They are worth the reward," Dahlia had huskily replied, and she craned her neck and lowered her weapon. She remembered that first bite so clearly. She had stolen the magical dagger from the corpse of Winnie Bean and held it in her hand, ready to spin about and put it up through the vampire's jaw, through his mouth, and into his brain, the instant she sensed that frenzy, that primal hunger overwhelming him. But as soon as those fangs had engaged, as soon as the warmth of blood and the mist of darkness had begun to mingle, Dahlia understood that she would do no such thing, even if this...
To keep listening to this audiobook, I've left you a link in the description so you can do it, at no cost thanks to Audible's 30-day free trial.